Hi, my name is Liora. I'm 32, and last week I stood in the boardroom of the company I co-founded, while the father who raised me was arrested for trying to kill me. It should have been a tragedy, but it became the moment I stopped letting them write my ending. I'd always been told I was too emotional to lead, that I should let the grown-ups handle it. But here's what they never expected. Grief has a memory, and mine remembers everything. Before I tell you what he whispered as the handcuffs clicked shut, if you've ever felt underestimated by the people who were supposed to protect you, leave a like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. It's small, but it tells me these stories matter and helps me keep telling more. The office was quiet that night. Just me, the soft hum of servers, and the low patter of rain against the floor-to-ceiling glass. Code danced across my screen in long, logical threads. I was debugging an API module for the next launch, something I could usually do in my sleep, but my fingers felt slower than usual, off, like my thoughts were walking through fog. On the windowsill behind me sat an old photo, me, maybe 7, sitting cross-legged next to my dad in the garage, soldering our first circuit board. His arm wrapped around my shoulders, both of us grinning under fluorescent light. I remember thinking then, he was my hero. My hand trembled as I reached for the coffee mug beside me. The ceramic was warm, familiar. He'd brought it to me earlier that day when he stopped by. "Can't have my superstar falling asleep at the keyboard," he'd joked, pressing the mug into my palm. The first sip had been bitter, unusual for my usual roast, but I'd shrugged it off. My stomach had been uneasy ever since. At 1:14 a.m., a sharp pain cut through my chest. Not stabbing, burning, like someone had lit a match behind my ribs. I gasped, doubling over, the mug slipping from my grip and shattering on the marble floor. My fingers clawed at the edge of the desk. I was sweating, breathing hard. My legs refused to move. Something was wrong, very wrong. I reached for my phone, but my vision blurred. The screen danced in and out of focus. My thumb hovered over the emergency dial when a text notification blinked onto the screen. From Dad. "Rest. We'll handle the company." I blinked. My throat tightened. Another wave of nausea hit hard and fast. I sank to the floor, heart thudding wildly in my chest. The words echoed, distorted, growing louder inside my skull. "Rest. We'll handle the company." Had he known? Had he meant something by that? My inner voice started to fracture. Maybe this was stress. Maybe I'd skipped too many meals. Maybe I was just... No, this wasn't stress. I tried crawling toward the hallway, but the walls seemed to stretch, twist, like a bad dream. The office lights flickered, too bright, too sharp. My breath rasped as panic tightened its grip. In the glass reflection, I saw myself, pale, lips trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. My mind screamed what my mouth couldn't say. Dad wouldn't. He wouldn't do this. But somewhere deep in my gut, a colder voice whispered, "Wouldn't he?" The hallway outside was darker than it should have been. My knees scraped against the polished floor, the sting registering only faintly. A faint buzz of motion sensors kicked on the strip lighting, stretching a glowing path toward the elevator. That's when I heard it. Car tires screeching outside. Headlights slashed across the glass, too fast, too close. I turned, shielding my eyes just as a black SUV swerved toward the building. I caught only a flash. Chrome grille, tinted windows, then nothing but the blinding white beam that swallowed the room whole. My body folded in on itself. Everything went still. Silence. A smell I couldn't place. Metallic, chemical, wrong. And then, darkness. Total, absolute darkness. But just before it took me, I remember thinking not about the pain or the confusion or even the betrayal. I thought about that mug, the one he gave me, the exact angle he smiled when he handed it over, the little pause between his words. And that was the moment I realized something about that night didn't add up. I came to in a haze of antiseptic and beeping monitors, the world swimming above me in sterile shades of white and gray. For a long moment, I wasn't sure where I was, or who I could still trust. The sheets felt stiff against my skin, tucked too tightly around my body like restraints. My throat burned with dryness, and every breath scraped like it had to work too hard. A heart monitor beeped steadily at my side, each blip pulling me back to reality with cruel precision. I turned my head and saw it, an IV bag suspended above me, clear fluid dripping rhythmically into the line taped to my arm. The hospital room was small but expensive. Familiar. I'd helped donate to this facility once when we were rebranding Vance Tech as a community-first company. Community first, family first, all branding, all lies. A dull ache crawled across my chest, not just from the physical toll, but from the memory of that text. Rest. We'll handle the company. Not, I'm here. Not, are you okay? Not even a goddamn question mark. My hand flinched against the scratchy sheet. I needed answers. Or maybe I needed revenge. Maybe both. But first, I needed to remember. The memory came slowly at first, like ink bleeding across paper. My mother's funeral. I couldn't have been older than 16. Everyone said she went peacefully, a heart defect, undetected, unpreventable. My father had held me so tightly that day, like I was the last fragile piece left in the world. I remember the scent of rain on the casket canopy, the slippery grass beneath my black shoes, and Cassia. That perfect posture, that carefully folded handkerchief dabbing at her dry eyes, and when no one was looking, the way she leaned into my father, whispering something with a tilt of her lips that didn't match the moment. That was the first time I felt something wrong and did nothing about it. A nurse knocked once too gently before sliding into the room. Blonde, early 30s, with tired eyes and a clipboard. She glanced up, startled. "Oh, you're awake." I tried to speak, but the words cracked in my throat like broken glass. She poured water and helped me sip. Her hands were warm, real. "You've been under for a while," she said. "Poison, low dose, built up over time, scary stuff." I blinked at her. "Poison?" She nodded, but before I could ask more, she glanced at the chart and added, "Your family's been notified. They were here earlier. Your father and stepmother, Cassia?" Something about the way she said their names. Careful. Neutral. Like she was reading a script. "They said not to worry, that you'd be fine. They asked about your insurance." That's when the chill truly hit me. "They left already?" The nurse paused. "Yes, but they seemed calm. Too calm, if you ask me." My fingers dug into the thin blanket. Calm. Insurance. What kind of parents walk out on their daughter's poisoning with that kind of poise? She left quietly, and I lay there trying to slow my breathing. But nothing could stop the thoughts now. My mind was unraveling, thread by thread. Later that night, I pretended to be asleep when they returned. The door opened with a soft hiss, and their voices drifted in low tones. "I told you, Elliot," Cassia murmured. "It'll hold. The doctors believe it was foodborne." He let out a sigh, the kind he used to make when I failed a physics test. "We can't risk another setback. The board is nervous, and if she wakes up with questions—" "She won't last long," she whispered. My eyes burned as I fought to keep them closed. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my molars might crack. I held every muscle still, even as my heartbeat thundered in my chest. Her voice had the same sugary edge it always did, but the words underneath were acid. Footsteps approached. I felt Elliot's presence before I heard him. The air shifted, colder, heavier. "You sure she didn't hear that?" he asked. Cassia chuckled softly. "She's sedated, you saw the chart." They stood there for a beat too long. I could feel my father's gaze lingering. I wanted to scream, to open my eyes and confront them. But something deeper, older, told me to wait. They left. The door closed. And only then did I let out a breath. My body shivered uncontrollably, not from cold, but from the realization that I'd been sleeping beside snakes for years. I had mistaken manipulation for mentorship, greed for guidance. How long had this been planned? My thoughts spiraled. Had Mom seen it? Had she suspected something back then? That faint unease at her funeral, was that her warning buried beneath the grief? A sudden memory clawed its way up. Mom sitting at the kitchen table, one hand clutching her chest, the other reaching toward me as I ran to call Dad. But he'd told me not to call 911, said it was panic, said she just needed rest. I was 14. My stomach lurched. And then from somewhere deep inside, another voice surfaced. Steady, sharp. "You survived. You weren't supposed to, but you did." The nurse returned briefly, checking vitals. I asked in a whisper if I could make a call. Her eyes softened. She handed me a tablet. I typed with trembling fingers. To Talia Reed. Subject: I need you. Now. Body: don't trust anyone, especially him. If you're still in the bay, come quietly. Burner phone only. Please. I hesitated, then hit send. I didn't know if Talia would answer, or if she'd still want anything to do with me after what happened between us 2 years ago, but she was the only person I'd ever told the full truth to, and right now, she might be the only person alive I could trust. The IV beeped softly as I lay back. In the dark, I could still hear Cassia's voice. She won't last long, and somewhere underneath that threat, something else was beginning to stir. Not fear, not confusion, resolve. Because if they wanted me gone, they should have finished the job. Hospitals are supposed to feel safe, controlled, predictable, but that room, with its soft lighting and quiet mechanical hum, felt like a coffin. No locks, no certainty, no real protection. I lay still under the thin blanket, staring at the ceiling tiles, trying to ignore the sting in my veins as another round of IV fluids dripped through the tube. They said it was to flush the toxins, but part of me wasn't sure what was worse, the poison itself, or the truth it unearthed. A framed photo sat on the nightstand. Me and my father, years ago. I recognized it from his desk. I didn't remember anyone bringing it in. I turned my head and stared at our smiling faces. My eyes in the picture were wide, hopeful. His hand rested on my shoulder, gentle, assuring. I felt sick. The door opened slowly and I tensed. Every muscle braced. But it was just a nurse, a different one. Male, tall, kind eyes. He checked the monitor and made a note. His voice was soft when he spoke. Vitals are stabilizing. Can you tell me exactly what was in my system? My voice came out thin, cracked. He hesitated. I'm not supposed to discuss details, but let's just say it wasn't accidental. I sat up too quickly. Pain sliced through my ribs. What do you mean? He looked around before leaning closer. They found traces of digitalis, a plant-based compound used to treat heart issues, but in higher doses, it's lethal. Your body's been breaking it down over weeks. Herbal tea, I whispered. He straightened. That would do it. My stomach clenched. That tea. My father had given it to me, brought it to my office more than once, even joked about its stress-relieving powers. I wanted to vomit. He adjusted my IV and added gently, You're lucky someone found you when they did. But no one had found me. I'd collapsed alone. The crash had come later, and no one was calling it what it was, attempted murder. Was anyone else notified? Police? He paused. A report was filed, but no foul play was confirmed. Family said it could have been something you took accidentally. I laughed, a low, humorless sound. Of course they did. After he left, I closed my eyes and replayed it all. The strange bitterness in the tea, the fatigue that didn't feel like burnout, the bruises on my arms that I'd brushed off as clumsiness. Little symptoms, quiet alarms. I'd ignored them all, because I didn't want to believe. A sudden memory hit me like a slap. My father standing in the kitchen 3 weeks ago, stirring a pot of soup, whistling like everything was fine. He poured me tea without asking, like he always did, smiled like a man who had nothing to hide. But that night, I'd noticed something, the way he lingered, watching me take that first sip. He watched me drink it. The thought shook me. My hands curled into fists on top of the blanket. A gentle knock interrupted the storm. It was the doctor. Mid-40s, composed, clipboard in hand. She smiled politely, but her eyes scanned me like a checklist. Ms. Vance, you're stable enough to be discharged tomorrow. We'll prescribe medication for the residual effects, but the toxin levels have dropped significantly. I blinked. You're sending me home? Technically, you weren't admitted under a police investigation. There's no current hold. Of course not. My father would have made sure of that. She glanced at her chart. Your stepmother signed some of the initial consent forms. You're listed as under their care. No, I said firmly. I'm not under anyone's care. She paused, studying me. Then I'd suggest arranging for someone you trust to stay with, at least for a few days. Trust. That word again. It felt radioactive. After she left, I sat up and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My knees trembled, but I stood. I needed clarity, something, anything, to ground me. I shuffled toward the window, dragging the IV stand beside me. Below, the parking lot buzzed with daylight. Nurses in navy scrubs. A toddler with a balloon. A man in a black coat leaning against a silver car. I froze. The car. Familiar. Sleek. Quiet. My father's. He stood outside it, phone to his ear. Calm. Collected. Like he wasn't the reason I'd just spent days hovering between life and death. Then he looked up, directly at my window. Our eyes locked. I stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. My legs gave out, and I grabbed the IV pole to keep from collapsing. A minute later, the nurse re-entered. "Ms. Vance, you okay?" I nodded, swallowing bile. "Can you do me a favor?" "Of course. If anyone comes asking for me, tell them I checked out." "You want to leave?" "I want to disappear." That night, I called a rideshare under a fake name and had it drop me 3 blocks from the nearest motel. I paid in cash. Room 107 smelled like bleach and despair, but it was mine, and it was safe. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, waiting, watching, and then it came. A local news alert buzzed across the screen. Tech CEO in critical condition after fatal crash. Sources say she died at the scene. I stared at it, heart slowing. My mouth went dry. Died at the scene? That was the story they were pushing? My fingers trembled as I scrolled further. A brief segment, blurry crash footage, a fire crew, a tarp. They'd staged it. Or someone had. That's when the twist hit like ice water down my spine. They think I'm dead. A way out for them. A slow smile spread across my face, and for the first time in days, it wasn't from fear. It was clarity. If they believed I was gone, I could move without them watching. I could fight back. But first, I needed answers. And there was one thing I hadn't dared touch until now, my father's favorite herbal tea blend, still on the company's inventory list. I pulled up the purchase logs on my encrypted tablet. Last distributor, Cassia's old pharmaceutical contact, of course. A sharp knock rattled the motel door. I froze. Another knock, firmer, then silence. I crept to the door, heart racing, and peered through the peephole. Empty hallway. But tucked under the door, an envelope. No name. No return address. Just 3 words handwritten in red ink. We saw everything. The envelope was thin, but the weight of those 3 words, "we saw everything," pressed on me like a stone. I held it in trembling fingers, the paper cool and crisp, the ink just barely smudged from moisture. Whoever had slipped it under my motel door knew where I was, knew I was alive. But the worst part? They knew what had happened, and they were watching. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. My hands were slick with sweat. The air in the room thickened, the low hum of the mini fridge pulsing louder, as if mocking my heartbeat. Finally, I tore it open. Inside was a single flash drive. No note, no markings, just matte black plastic. For a second, I sat frozen. Then I grabbed my laptop, still booted from last night, and inserted the drive. 1 file, no name, just a timestamp. 02:04 a.m. cam 17. I clicked. Grainy dashcam footage filled the screen. A desolate stretch of road, early morning. My car, recognizable even through distortion, approached an intersection. Headlights swerved into frame behind it. Then, the footage stuttered. My car jerked left, skidding out of control. A sudden spark, then the sickening crunch of metal. But no other vehicle had made contact. I leaned closer, rewound, watched again. No impact, just failure. Sudden, intentional. And then I saw her. On the right-hand edge of the frame, only for a second, Talia, running, barefoot, toward my crumpled car. I gasped. My fingers gripped the trackpad so tight my knuckles popped. Talia had been there. She hadn't just seen the crash, she'd pulled me from it. Before the fire, before the scene was scrubbed. But why hadn't she come to the hospital? Why hadn't she called? The motel clock blinked 9:13 a.m. I didn't hesitate. I dialed her burner. 2 rings. Then her voice. "Liora?" "Talia, thank God. Where are you?" Silence. Then, "Are you alone?" "Yes, I got your footage. You saved my life." "You don't know the half of it," she said. A pause. "Meet me in person. I can't talk long. Too many eyes." "Where?" "South Fremont. Same spot, 30 minutes. The line went dead. I didn't stop to pack. I barely remembered to grab the flash drive. My car was long gone, so I called a rideshare, sitting in the back seat with my hood up, trying to keep my breathing steady. South Fremont. A rusted pedestrian bridge behind a shuttered rail station. We used to hide there as teenagers, pretending the world couldn't find us. Now it felt like the only place left where I could be human. When I arrived, the wind had picked up. Weeds grew through cracked pavement. A single crow screeched from the wire overhead. She appeared from behind one of the pillars, hood pulled low, eyes hidden behind cheap sunglasses. But I knew that posture, the stiffness, the cautious scan of her surroundings. "Talia." She pulled me into a hug. Tight, too tight. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "They said you died. I watched the news 10 times just to be sure I hadn't imagined you surviving." I pulled back, studying her face. "You were there." "I saw the whole thing. I was 2 blocks away, heading to your place to talk, warn you, and then your car spun out like someone sliced its veins." "Brake lines?" I asked. She nodded. "Gone. Clean cuts." I swallowed hard. "And no one believed it?" "They didn't want to," she said. "And by the time the wreckage was cleared, you were missing. They said you'd burned beyond recognition, but I knew." My eyes stung. "Why didn't you come find me?" "I had to disappear. I found something bigger." She reached into her bag and handed me a folded document, a scanned will, labeled "Last Testament of Liora Vance." My stomach flipped. It was dated 3 weeks ago. Cassia's name was on the beneficiary line. I scanned for the signature. My father's. Neat, familiar, but something was off. My hand trembled as I touched the screen. The date, the formatting, even the witness signatures, both names I didn't recognize. "I never signed this," I whispered. Talia looked away. "They forged it. I heard Cassia talking to someone at a gala last month, bragging, said it would be airtight by the time the papers hit probate." Rage surged up my throat like bile. "They were going to kill me and rewrite my legacy," I said. "They still might," Talia added quietly. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were tired, sunken. There was something else there too, fear, not just for me, for herself. "How deep are you in?" I asked. She hesitated. "Deeper than I wanted to be. I hacked their private server after the crash, found partial files, contracts, names, offshore routing numbers." I gripped her wrist. "Can you prove it?" She nodded. "But we'll need help." A cold wind blew through the underpass. My phone buzzed. "Blocked number," I answered. A voice I hadn't heard since I was 19 rasped through the speaker. "Well, princess, took you long enough to rise from the dead. Elliot, my father." I couldn't speak. My lungs refused to work. "I assume you've seen the headlines. Not bad for a eulogy, right?" "Why?" I whispered. He chuckled. "You always ask the wrong questions. It was never why, Liora. It was when." Click. The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, chest heaving. Talia stepped forward. "What did he say?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her. Because in that moment, I knew. The will, the brakes, the poisoning. This wasn't panic. This was a business strategy. And I was the liability. I've always believed that code was cleaner than people. You write a function, it runs. If it breaks, you debug it. There's logic, cause and effect. But standing in Talia's apartment, staring at a wall of monitors and blinking lines of encrypted data, I realized even code can be twisted, just like family. The space was dim, lit only by the blue glow of screens and the soft flicker of an old lava lamp in the corner. A faint scent of solder and burnt coffee clung to the air. It wasn't a home. It was a bunker for someone who'd stopped pretending to trust the outside world. Talia handed me a hoodie, black, oversized, and pointed to the desk chair. "Sit, you need to see this." I pulled the hoodie on and eased into the chair, my fingers gripping the worn leather arms. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat on the terminal window. She tapped a few keys. A cascade of file names populated the screen. VX, Treasury Transfers, CBO Finance Audit, Cassia Proxy Access. "These are copies," she said. "The originals, gone, scrubbed clean. But not before Nico pulled them. He left a back door in the system years ago. He never told anyone, not even me." My breath hitched. Nico Salazar. I hadn't thought about him in a long time. He was brilliant, reckless, and fired after a security breach 2 years ago. My father had been the one who insisted we cut him loose. Now I understood why. Talia opened one of the files. A spreadsheet filled the screen, rows and rows of transactions, corporate accounts bleeding money into shell companies with foreign addresses. "Look at the timestamps," she said. "Every major withdrawal lines up with something else. Your hospital admission, the board's emergency votes, and—" She hesitated. "What?" She opened another tab. This one showed a series of screen captures from a private Slack channel. Messages between Cassia and 2 unnamed users. One read, "Her vitals dropped. Legal's prepping the paperwork. Tell the board she died at 2:14 a.m. Another, "The payout will clear in 3 business days." I felt my stomach twist. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. Insurance. They weren't just trying to kill me, they were trying to profit from it. "How much?" I asked. She didn't answer with words, just highlighted the number at the bottom of the transfer log. $7,000. I felt hollow, like every organ inside me had turned to dust. "I want every file, every message," I said quietly, "and I want to know who else knew." "I'll copy everything," she said, "but you need to be careful. I think they've got eyes on me, too. Someone's been pinging my IP." I stood and paced the room, dragging my fingers along the edge of the desk. Somewhere beneath the dread, something colder began to rise. Focus. The kind that settles when there's no more room for fear. "They think I'm dead," I murmured. "Good, let's use that." Talia nodded. "I've got burner laptops, secure drives, and Nico's old safe house. Off-grid, no surveillance. You'll be invisible." I turned to her. "You're not coming?" She hesitated. "I can't, not yet. There's something else. I need to pull surveillance from inside Vance Tech, internal cameras, server logs." "Too risky," I said. "Too necessary," she countered. We locked eyes, the same way we had back in college when we first built a startup from my mom's garage. Before the funding, before the board, before everything broke. She broke the silence. "There's something else." "What now?" "A shadow." She pulled up a feed from her motion detection cam, a tall silhouette pacing outside her fire escape 20 minutes ago, grainy, indistinct, but definitely watching. My pulse spiked. "Could be Nico," I said, but I didn't believe it. "I thought that too," she said, "but then I found this." She handed me a printed screen capture, an IP trace from 2 nights ago. Same pattern that routed through your father's VPN. I felt cold seep into my spine. Elliot wasn't just orchestrating, he was tracking. And now that I was digging, he'd dig back. I took a breath and looked around her apartment. The walls seemed thinner, the air heavier, no longer safe. "I need to leave tonight," I said. She nodded and grabbed a silver case from under the desk. "This has everything. Boot protocols, untraceable browsers, SIM spoofers. Use it wisely." I zipped it shut and slung it over my shoulder. At the door, I paused. "If they come, I'll vanish," she said, cutting me off. "This isn't my first storm." My fingers tightened on the knob. "I'm going to bury them, Talia." Her voice was soft, fierce, then dig deep. I stepped into the night. The air was sharp, tinged with smoke from someone burning leaves nearby. A stray cat darted into an alley. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Not close. Not yet. I walked 4 blocks before switching alleys and doubling back. Paranoia had become muscle memory now. At the edge of the district, I found a shuttered warehouse, Nico's supposed hideout. The keypad blinked red, then green after I entered the code Talia gave me. Inside, the place was silent. Rows of old monitors, unused gear, dust-coated desks. But it was dry, secluded. And for now, mine. I sat down, plugged in the drive, and began the upload. Each file was a step deeper into the grave they'd dug for me, each byte a shovel in my hand. But just as the final folder loaded, the screen flashed. Connection request, external server, user, unknown. My blood ran cold. Then a message popped up. "You're getting close, Liora, but not close enough." The message stayed on the screen, pulsing like a heartbeat. "You're getting close, Liora, but not close enough." I didn't move. My hand hovered over the keyboard, cold sweat gathering at the base of my neck. My first instinct was to disconnect the drive, smash the system, run. But I stayed still, staring at those words as if they might blink and vanish. They didn't. A soft hum from the server rack filled the silence. I could feel the heat rising off the machine, the faint vibration beneath my palms. Someone was watching. Live. I forced my fingers to type, "Who is this?" No reply. Instead, the screen blinked again. A second message appeared. "You're not the only one digging." Then the connection dropped. The cursor returned, blinking as if nothing had happened. But something had. My fingers tightened into a fist. Somewhere, someone was inside my perimeter. Not just in the system, but in my world. Before I could process more, the burner phone lit up. "Talia," I answered on the second ring. "Liora," she said, breathless. "Are you still at the hideout?" "Yeah, why?" "Get out, now." "What happened?" "There's no time. Nico found something. He's on his way, but I don't know how long you've got." My pulse jumped. "What did he find?" A pause, then. "A third name. Someone working with your father. Someone inside the board." Silence stretched. I barely breathed. "Who?" "I don't know yet," she whispered. "But they're moving fast. Your location might be compromised." I didn't wait. I stuffed the flash drive into my jacket pocket, slammed the laptop shut, and grabbed the go-bag Talia had packed. My boots hit the floor hard as I bolted down the staircase 2 steps at a time. The door groaned as I shoved it open and hit the alley. The air outside was crisp and wet. It had just rained. Pavement slick with oil and light mist. Every street lamp felt like a spotlight. Every parked car, a potential threat. I walked fast, head down, weaving through the maze of industrial lots until I reached the tunnel underpass where we used to tag walls with dumb graffiti. I waited there, hidden behind a rusted container, heart pounding, eyes scanning every movement. A memory surfaced. Me and Talia in college, sneaking out after curfew, laughing so loud it echoed down the tunnels. We were fearless then, stupid, but free. That version of me didn't exist anymore. Footsteps broke the silence. I turned sharply. It was Nico. He looked rough. Dark circles under his eyes, hoodie damp from the rain, a backpack slung low on one shoulder. But his gaze was clear, alert. "You really shouldn't be this visible," he muttered, stepping into the shadow beside me. "You found something." He nodded. Multiple logins from someone on the board, accessing shell accounts tied to the offshore wire transfers. But get this. Those logins were scrubbed. Someone used a third-party masking protocol, one I built. I blinked. "Wait, you built the masking tool?" "Yeah, for whistleblowers," he said, almost ashamed. "But someone stole the framework and repurposed it, turned it into a smokescreen for fraud. And now they're using it against me." "Exactly." A train passed overhead, loud and slow. The ground rumbled. Nico leaned in closer. "Cassia's not the only monster here, Liora. Your dad's not either. There's someone else, someone who knows how to manipulate systems from the inside." I swallowed. "Another executive?" "I don't know. Could be an investor, a proxy voter, but whoever it is, they're more dangerous than Elliot. They know how to erase footprints." I felt my throat tighten. "So what do we do?" Nico pulled a slim drive from his coat pocket. I logged a trace, barely caught it before it looped, but if we hit their server with the right frequency, it'll trigger a diagnostic. That'll show us their access point. "And if they catch us first?" He stared at me. "Then we're dead." I nodded once. "Let's go." But just before we left the tunnel, I heard it, a sharp crack. Not metal, not footsteps, gunfire. We both dropped instinctively behind the container as another shot echoed, pinging off the far wall. Nico cursed under his breath. "They're already here." "Back entrance," I hissed, pointing behind a wire fence. We bolted through the shadows, hearts pounding, lungs burning. I didn't look back. We reached Talia's secondary safe house, a former storage unit above a laundromat. She opened the door before we even knocked. Her eyes were wide, scanning behind us. "You weren't followed?" "Maybe," I said. "But we didn't lead them here. We need to work fast." Inside, the room buzzed with static and energy. A web of monitors displayed spreadsheets, heat maps, login logs. One screen showed a paused security feed. Cassia pacing a hotel suite, phone in hand. "She's nervous," Talia muttered. "She's losing control." "She doesn't even know I'm alive," I said. Talia raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't. My mind kept circling back to the message. You're not the only one digging. What if they already knew everything? What if this wasn't a game of catch-up, but bait? Talia slid a flash drive across the table. "This is the full data dump from the last 2 weeks. Company finances, personal emails, encrypted calls." Nico grabbed it, plugged it into his setup. "If there's a mole on the board, we'll find them." I stared at the screen. My reflection ghosted across it, layered between layers of deceit and digital code. Then Talia said something that knocked the air from my lungs. "Liora, the third party? The one working with your dad?" "Yeah? I think it's someone who knew your mother." I froze. "What?" Nico looked up from the screen. Talia spoke slowly, carefully. "There's a shared contact listed in one of the financial records, name redacted, but the account was opened the same month your mom died." My voice broke. "You think her death wasn't natural?" Talia didn't answer. She didn't have to, because suddenly everything felt colder and so much bigger than I'd imagined. There's a specific kind of silence that fills a room after someone mentions your dead mother in the same breath as a conspiracy. It's not shock, not even grief. It's paralysis, the mind freezing before it can process what it just heard. I stood in Talia's safe house, numb, staring at her. "You think my mom's death wasn't natural?" She didn't answer, but her silence was more honest than any confirmation. Nico looked between us. "I dug deeper into that offshore account, the one tied to the payout trail. There's a transfer dated 10 days before your mom's heart attack, same name that shows up in the recent insurance file linked to you." My throat dried. "So whatever happened to me started long before me." Talia nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe she got too close. Maybe she knew something about Elliot, something he couldn't risk coming out." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the desk, my breath shallow. My entire childhood had been shaped by that one tragedy, the quiet way my father folded into himself afterward, the late nights at his office, the soft promises that he'd always protect me. All of it had been performance. I forced myself to focus. "Show me the ledger." Nico pulled it up. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Rows and rows of structured transactions. Clean, clinical, cold. Every number was a wound dressed in digital cloth. Company money funneled through development initiatives, external consultants, expedited insurance allocations. A maze of corruption hidden in plain sight. $7 million total, Nico said, spread across 6 holding accounts. 4 of them tie back to Cassia. 1 is still anonymous. The last one, it's listed under a defunct wellness startup, Elliot's project from 10 years ago. I blinked. "The one that failed before I graduated college?" Nico nodded. "Turns out it didn't fail. It pivoted, became a laundering funnel." I stared at the screen. Every cell screamed betrayal. But it wasn't until Talia opened the audio file that I felt it in my bones. Cassia's voice, hushed and brittle, crackled through the speaker. "The girl's fading, just like the mother did. It's faster this time." There was a pause, then Elliot's voice, sharp and exhausted. "She was always too smart for her own good. Finish it. I'll prep the board." The room went still. My ears rang. My hands shook. They hadn't just tried to erase me. They'd done it before. Talia reached over, placed her hand gently over mine. "You don't have to listen to the rest." I did. I had to. "This isn't personal," Cassia murmured. "It's just cleanup." "It's always personal," Elliot replied. "You just learn how to bury it." The audio cut. My body felt heavier than it ever had, like gravity had doubled. This wasn't a betrayal, it was a legacy. "I want to burn them down," I said, voice low. Talia nodded. "Then we use this. We leak it to the press, send it to the SEC, trigger an internal investigation." I shook my head. "That's not enough. They'll spin it. They'll call it doctored. We need a confrontation. Live. Unstoppable." "Board meeting," Nico said. "You've got one scheduled in 3 days." "I'm dead to the board." "Exactly," he replied, "which means they'll be unguarded. You show up mid-meeting. With this," he gestured to the screen, "and a live stream? That's checkmate." For a moment, the fire in my chest sparked into something close to hope, but it didn't last long. Talia's burner lit up. An unknown number. She froze, glanced at me, then answered on speaker. A male voice filled the room, low, clipped, professional. "We know what you're doing. Stop now, or we stop her. For real this time." Click. The line went dead. Talia's hand dropped. Nico backed away from the console. "They're watching the network," he muttered. "They're intercepting the signals. We can't upload anything from here." "Then we move," I said. "Different location, different network." But the tension stayed, heavy, lingering. The call was a warning, but it felt like a countdown. As Nico packed the drives, I wandered toward the small window. Outside, dusk had fallen. The lights of the city blinked through the fog like distant stars. Somewhere out there, people laughed, ate dinner, kissed goodnight. They had no idea what monsters sat in boardrooms, wearing tailored suits while signing off on death sentences. A flicker of movement below caught my eye. A man in a gray coat, standing still, watching the window. I stepped back. Nico noticed. "Problem?" "We're out of time," I said. 15 minutes later, we were on the move. Nico and Talia in one car, me in another. I wore a wig, tinted glasses, coat 3 sizes too big. We separated at the freeway ramp, agreeing to meet at an abandoned warehouse near Redwood that Nico used during his underground projects. The drive was quiet, tense. My mind spun, cassette reels of memory and suspicion. I kept returning to one thing, that anonymous ledger account, the one that wasn't Cassia's or Elliot's, the one opened the same month my mother died. Who did it belong to? When I pulled into the warehouse lot, the building loomed dark and skeletal under the sodium streetlights. Nico's car was already there, but Talia's wasn't. I stepped out, heart already racing. Nico met me at the door. "No word from her?" I shook my head. "She's late." We waited 10 minutes, then 15. At 20, Nico's phone buzzed, a single text from Talia. "They know." Attached was a blurry photo. It showed a man in a suit, my father, standing at the edge of Talia's apartment parking lot, smiling. My father's face, calm, smug, standing in front of Talia's apartment, burned into my vision like a brand. The blurry photo she'd sent stayed open on Nico's screen, frozen mid-smile, as if he knew we'd be watching. As if this entire nightmare had been choreographed step by step and we'd just danced into his trap. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, because for the first time I realized something terrifying. He wasn't losing control. He wanted us to get this far, and now he wanted us to know. Nico stepped back from the monitor. "We need to move again. If he's at Talia's place—" "I know," I cut in. My voice felt distant in my throat, like I was speaking from underwater. "He's not bluffing." I paced the warehouse floor, boots crunching over broken plaster. The cold was sharp now, clinging to the air like static. My thoughts raced, tripping over each other. What if he had Talia? What if she was being used as leverage, just like he used everything else? I stopped beside one of the dusty filing cabinets Nico had cracked open earlier. My fingers traced the rusted edge. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "Storage crate he used to keep at the old Vance Tech West office," Nico replied. "We found it dumped with surplus when they moved locations. I pulled it thinking it might have paper backups." I opened the top drawer. Just old HR memos, training manuals, some faded conference lanyards. Nothing important. But the second drawer stuck. I had to yank it hard, metal groaning as it slid free. Inside was a manila envelope, yellowed with time and sealed with a brittle piece of tape. There was one word written on it in fading ink. Liora. My breath caught. I picked it up slowly, like it might dissolve in my hands. "Is this new?" I asked. Nico shook his head. "It's been there for years, maybe since before the reorg." I peeled the seal open. Inside was a handwritten letter, cursive, graceful, my mother's handwriting. "Liora, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. Something I feared, but couldn't stop." I sat down without realizing it, legs folding beneath me like paper. "I've hidden this here because I'm not safe, and if I'm not, neither are you." Tears blurred the ink. My chest tightened with every line. "Your father isn't who you think he is. I found discrepancies, financial, legal, personal. I confronted him. He promised to fix it. But I saw it in his eyes, Liora. He never planned to." My throat closed. "If anything happens to me, don't trust him. Not ever. And if Cassia's still around, run." She signed it simply, Love. Always. Mom. The letter fell from my hands, landing softly on the concrete. A silence settled over the warehouse, thicker than before. He killed her. I knew it now, not just as a theory, but as a certainty that lived in my bones. Nico sat across from me, quiet. "She tried to warn me," I whispered. "She knew." "We can use that letter," he said. "It ties his motive back years, proves a pattern." I nodded, numb. But something else stirred under the grief, something sharper. He hadn't just murdered her, he'd manipulated me with the aftermath, used my grief as leverage, pushed me toward perfection to cover his sins. And now he was doing it again, with Talia. I stood. "We're done running." "We don't even know if Talia's okay," Nico said. I turned to him. "Then we find out." He exhaled, pulled out his laptop. "There's a tracking signature embedded in the image Talia sent. It was subtle, but intentional. She wanted us to follow it." He loaded the metadata. Signal pinged from an old civic building downtown, decommissioned police station, closed 3 years ago. Of course, a ghost location. Easy to hide something in a place meant for justice. I grabbed my coat. "Let's go." But just before we stepped out, Nico's phone buzzed, a voicemail. He played it on speaker. "Come alone, Liora. No live streams, no lawyers, no games. You bring that letter or you'll need another grave. And this time, make sure it's real." My blood iced over. Cassia, her voice had changed. No more velvet, just venom. She was the one calling the shots now, and she knew about the letter. "How could she know?" I whispered. "We just opened it." Nico's eyes narrowed. "Unless she planted it." My heart pounded. "Bait," I said. He nodded grimly. "They want us to bring it to them, on their terms." I paced the room. Every cell in my body screamed this was a trap. But what choice did we have? "She mentioned another grave," I said. "That means Talia's alive, for now." Nico didn't reply, because we both knew what was coming. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reckoning, and I was going to walk into it with the truth in my hand and revenge in my blood. There's a kind of silence that only exists in corporate boardrooms, a silence polished by power and protected by money. Even the air feels filtered, controlled, rehearsed. You can smell the espresso, but never the rot beneath. I stood in the lobby of the Vance Tech headquarters, my palms pressed to the inside of my coat pocket, where the letter from my mother sat, folded and trembling like a heartbeat. I could feel its edges against my skin, but the weight it carried was far heavier. Security barely glanced at me, just another woman in a tailored coat, head down, phone in hand. They didn't recognize me. That was the point. I passed the main elevators and slipped into the service lift, slower, older, with walls that still had scratches from the building's construction years ago. I remembered being 12, sneaking rides up and down with a keycard my father gave me, back when I still believed he loved me. The elevator creaked to a halt on the top floor. I stepped out, heels clicking against marble, breath steady but tight. The hallway outside the boardroom was lined with tinted glass, reflecting fragments of my face. Part of me here, part of me missing. Then I pushed open the door. The room went still. 14 board members sat around a glossy walnut table, eyes already fixed on Elliot at the head. Cassia stood behind him, perfectly coiffed, one manicured hand resting lightly on the back of his chair. And then there was me, alive. Every head turned. The silence broke like a pane of glass. "You're supposed to be dead," Elliot said, voice low. I walked to the center of the room and dropped the manila envelope onto the table with a soft slap. "Sorry to disappoint." Cassia took a step forward. "This is a closed session. Security will—" "They won't come," I cut in. "You disabled the floor alarms for privacy. I re-enabled them." Elliot's mouth twitched. I pulled out my phone, opened the livestream app, and hit broadcast. "Say hi to the shareholders," I said, "and the public." The projector on the far wall flickered. Nico had hacked the internal system hours ago. One by one, files began to appear. The forged will, the financial transfers, the Slack messages, the audio recording, gasps, shuffling chairs. One of the members muttered, "What the hell is this?" Cassia's voice broke through. "All of this is manufactured, fabricated by a disgruntled ex-employee. She's emotionally unstable." "I was poisoned," I snapped. "I was declared dead. You forged documents to steal the company and murdered my mother to do it." A ripple moved through the room. I opened the letter and read it aloud. Every word from my mother's hand felt like a funeral and a resurrection at once. When I finished, I looked up and locked eyes with Elliot. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. "Touching," he said. "But you're not here for justice, Liora. You're here for revenge." "Maybe," I said. "But I'm not the one who buried a woman and signed her death certificate with a smile." He stood slowly. "You think the board will believe that letter? That audio?" Cassia smirked. "It's hearsay at best, emotional blackmail at worst." But something shifted. One of the older board members, Harvey Braun, cleared his throat. "Elliot, were you aware of these transfers?" Elliot didn't answer. "Cassia?" Harvey asked, voice sharper. She smiled again, but it was thinner this time. "Everything was approved through standard executive processes." Harvey looked to me. "Miss Vance, do you have the original ledger?" I nodded. "And backups in 4 locations." A pause. Then the door opened again. Talia, bruised, alive, holding a flash drive. The room exploded with murmurs. "I figured you'd miss me," she said, and tossed the drive to Nico, who caught it clean. He plugged it into the console. A full copy of the offshore ledger lit up the screen. Cassia's face dropped. So did Elliot's. Talia stepped beside me, leaning in. "They tried to keep me quiet." "But they forgot who taught me how to encrypt." Elliot's voice cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing." "No," I said. "I understand exactly what I'm doing." Behind us, the projector screen split again, this time showing Nico's live stream count. Over 180,000 viewers, corporate partners, press outlets, government regulators, watching, listening. Cassia lunged for the flash drive. Talia stepped between them, hand in her coat. "I wouldn't." Cassia froze. Security burst in a moment later, real security. One of them leaned into Harvey's ear, whispered something, then nodded toward me. Harvey stood. "This board calls an emergency vote for removal of Elliot and Cassia Vance on grounds of gross misconduct, fraud, and attempted homicide." "Seconded," another board member said. I didn't look away from my father. He didn't blink, didn't plead. He just smiled, a slow, chilling smile that curled like smoke. "You still don't get it," he whispered. "What?" "There's always another move." The room was chaos behind me, votes being counted, voices rising, someone sobbing into their phone, but I kept my eyes on him, because somehow I believed him. I used to think betrayal was a sharp thing, like a knife, fast and final, but standing there in that boardroom, staring at my father's smug grin, I realized it wasn't. Betrayal was slow, it seeped, it decayed, it rewrote memories while you weren't looking. Cassia and Elliot had been voted out. The boardroom's legal team was already dialing the SEC. My live stream was still climbing, over 300,000 viewers now. Public opinion was turning. But even with everything collapsing around him, Elliot didn't look defeated. He looked prepared. "You think this ends with a vote?" he said, adjusting the cuffs of his suit like we were discussing a quarterly report. "You really think a live stream and a sympathy letter are enough?" "I don't need sympathy," I said, gripping the edge of the table. "I just need the truth out." Cassia's voice cut through. "That's not truth. That's curated trauma." She stepped forward, no longer bothering to pretend. "You built your story like a screenplay, Liora. You left out your tantrums, your breakdowns, your mistakes. You forgot to mention how many people you stepped on to get where you are." I met her gaze. "You poisoned me." She smiled. "And you survived. You should be thanking me. No one's ever cared more about your success." Talia moved beside me, arms crossed tight. Her bruises hadn't faded. Her voice was raw. "You hired men to watch my building. You silenced staff. You tried to erase her. You tried to erase me." Elliot chuckled. "We didn't silence anyone. We offered solutions." His tone was so casual it made my skin crawl. "You planned this for years," I said, voice low. "I built this company," he snapped, "from the ground up. Before you even knew how to code, I was negotiating seed rounds with VCs who wouldn't return your emails today." "You didn't build anything," I said. "You inherited it. Then you corrupted it." A sudden ping from Nico's laptop interrupted the tension. He looked up from his station at the edge of the room, eyes wide. "I have something," he said. "A hidden audio stream, recorded 2 nights ago. Cassia and someone else. Encrypted line. I just cracked it." I nodded. "Play it." The projector filled with Cassia's voice, this time shaking. "She's alive. I don't know how. Elliot swore it was done. A second voice, male, distorted but clear. Then you clean it up. No more accidents. We do this live. Talia glanced at me. You recognize the voice? I shook my head. Nico scrubbed the file back. Wait, listen to the background. Traffic, sirens, a soft chime every 30 seconds. I froze. Medical monitors, I whispered. She was in a hospital, maybe visiting, or watching someone. Nico frowned. Someone who's not supposed to be awake? Then it hit me. Check for logs tied to ICU admissions in private clinics. One with a cardiac trauma unit. Look for fake names, off-the-record invoices, anything tied to Elliot or Cassia's aliases. He started typing. I'll need a minute. The projector cut back to the live stream. Dozens of new comments poured in, some screaming for arrests, others demanding resignations, some stunned into silence. But just beneath that wave of attention, I felt something shift. Elliot wasn't trying to escape. He was waiting. For what? A ringtone echoed. Cassia's phone. She looked down, blanched. No, she whispered. I stepped forward. Who is it? She didn't answer. Talia grabbed the phone, flipped the screen toward us. One name on the display, V. Rourke. My stomach dropped. Rourke. That name had floated in emails buried in subcontracts whispered by the lawyer who'd helped draft the forged will. We thought he was a shell identity, a cleanup agent, a ghost. But now he was calling Cassia, and she wasn't smiling anymore. Nico's laptop beeped again. Found the clinic, found the patient. He turned the screen toward us. The file was labeled Patient X, Martin Rourke. Cassia hissed, Turn that off. Elliot's face changed, not anger, not fear, resignation. You really want to do this here? He asked. Yes, I said, because this is where you tried to bury me, and where I bury you back. Nico hit play on a new file, a voicemail, decrypted and time-stamped. This is Rourke. Cassia doesn't know I recorded this. Elliot said if anything went wrong with the girl, they'd pin it on me. I have documents, copies of the real ledger. If I disappear, they're yours. I'm not dying for this. Silence. Then a final click. Nico leaned forward. We traced the IP. Rourke's in a clinic 3 blocks from here. I looked at the board. We don't just have Cassia and Elliot. We have the fixer, the ledger, the confession, and a surviving witness. Cassia's face cracked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her body swayed like a tree in a dying storm. Elliot didn't flinch. You'll be alone again soon, he said. What? He smiled. People love a comeback, but they love a scandal more. You think this ends with you triumphant, but eventually you'll become the villain. I'll take that risk, I said, as long as you lose first. Behind us, sirens pierced the air. Red lights flashed through the tinted windows. Nico glanced at me. Cops are here. Cassia backed away from the table. You don't know what you've started. I walked toward her. No, I said. You don't know what you failed to finish. The door burst open. Uniforms filled the room. Cassia raised her hands. Elliot stayed still. But just before they cuffed him, he whispered one final word to me. Rourke. And somehow, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a promise. They say justice moves slowly, but when the cuffs clicked around Elliot's wrists, the moment moved like lightning through me. It didn't bring peace. Not yet. Just silence. And in that silence, I could feel the cost of everything I'd lost. For a few seconds after they were taken, the boardroom stood still. No one spoke. No one moved. Then Harvey Braun cleared his throat and gestured to the empty head chair at the far end of the table. Liora, he said, take your seat. I walked slowly toward it, each step heavier than the last. This was the same chair I'd pitched from, negotiated from, fought from, the one my father had claimed when he forced me out. I pulled it back, sat down, and exhaled. The wood was cold against my back. The leather cracked faintly beneath me, but it felt like mine. Talia stood behind me now, just as Cassia had behind Elliot not long ago, except her hand wasn't on my shoulder. She didn't need to hold me up. I motioned to reinstate Liora Vance as CEO of Vance Tech, Harvey said, effective immediately. Seconded, someone murmured. All in favor? Hands went up, one by one, steady, final. I nodded. Then let's get to work. The next 24 hours moved fast. Lawyers scrambled. The PR team released a carefully worded statement, one I rewrote myself. Leadership restructuring, internal investigation, allegations under review. The usual corporate elegance. But I made sure one thing was clear. I was back. And the truth was coming with me. Talia and Nico worked through the night restoring access to the ledgers, scrubbing traces of Elliot's surveillance tools, and freezing the remaining shell accounts. Half the accounts were already empty, but the paper trail was enough to bury anyone who touched them. By morning, the media storm was tidal. I sat at my old desk, sunlight spilling through the blinds, casting thin bars across the surface, and reread my mother's letter. The pages were soft now, smudged at the edges, but her voice rang louder than ever. She had tried to save me. She'd left breadcrumbs in the form of warnings, documents, and finally this letter. And still, part of me hated how long it took to see it. Elliot hadn't been a monster overnight. He'd built his empire brick by brick on secrets and silence, and I had been complicit in that silence. I looked out the window at the city below. San Jose's skyline glimmered faintly behind the morning fog. From this high up, everything looked small, manageable, but not everything was finished. Talia entered, holding a thin stack of files. Got the last audit. I gestured her in. She placed the folder down, then hesitated. There's something you should know. I looked up. She didn't sit, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I think Rourke sent another message. When? Last night, encrypted. Nico decrypted part of it, but... She paused. Liora, I think there's more. She pulled out a tablet and opened the message. I scanned the screen, a list of names, old contracts, black budget accounts tied to Vance Tech subsidiaries I'd never even heard of. These were hidden under a dummy holding company, she said, filed under a project called ArcLight. My stomach twisted. That was Mom's research program. She created it to develop biometric encryption. Talia nodded. Except this version? It's been monetized and repurposed. For what? Her lips pressed into a line. Surveillance, government contracts, blacklist analytics, stuff that makes even Nico nervous. I swallowed, hard. My father used her research. And partnered with people who've stayed hidden, so far. The letter, the betrayal, the ledger. All of it was only part of the rot. There was more, so much more. Talia touched my shoulder lightly. This doesn't end here, I nodded. It ends when it stops growing. At noon, I called an emergency shareholders meeting. Hundreds of faces dialed in. Analysts, journalists, institutional investors. They wanted blood. They wanted explanations. But I didn't give them spin. I gave them the truth. I told them what Cassia and Elliot had done. I walked them through the data. The payouts, the poison, the fake crash, the forged will. I told them I survived, and I told them I wasn't stepping down. I ended the call by holding up my mother's letter. My mother tried to protect this company before it became something monstrous. She died for it. I nearly did too. But we're going to rebuild this, not as a dynasty, not as a family brand, but as something honest. There was no applause, just silence. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. That night, I sat alone in my apartment for the first time in weeks. The windows were cracked open. Rain tapped against the panes like a ticking clock. Nico texted, "The feds are requesting Rourke's files. Want to meet?" I typed back, "Not yet. Tomorrow. I needed one night. Just one." But just as I set the phone down, another message buzzed through. Unknown number. I still have her voice. She told me everything. "You're not done, Liora." Attached, an audio file, and the name on the file made my hands go cold. motheroriginal.wave. I stared at the audio file on my screen, motheroriginal.wave. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The apartment was silent, save for the whisper of the rain, the same rain that had fallen the night she died, the same sound I'd clung to when everything else felt unreal. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, clearer than I remembered. Strong, calm, braver than I'd ever been. If you're hearing this, Liora, it means I didn't survive long enough to explain what I found. Each word hit like a slow wave. She talked about the ArcLight project, how it had started with promise and ended in secrets, how Elliot had convinced her to license the tech, only to weaponize it. She'd tried to pull back, tried to protect me. He said you'd be safe, that it was the only way. But I saw it in his eyes. If I became a liability, he'd erase me, just like he's done to others. I stood frozen in the center of the room, the echo of her voice curling around me. This wasn't a warning, it was a confession, a farewell, but it was also a torch passed. She hadn't been silenced, not anymore. The next morning I walked into the federal hearing with the letter in one hand and the audio file in the other. It was no longer about clearing my name or exposing Elliot. It was about ending the cycle. Rourke had already signed an affidavit. His testimony unraveled the last web of deniability Cassia and Elliot had built. Every board member who'd turned a blind eye was under review. They'd never rebuild what they lost, but that wasn't the victory I wanted. That came later, when I stood in front of the Vance Tech staff for the first time since reclaiming the CEO role. No suits, no microphones, just me. And the truth. Some of you may have believed I died, I began, eyes sweeping across the faces of people who had once called me boss, then stranger. And in a way, I did. The person I was, who trusted too easily, who avoided conflict, who assumed family meant safety. She didn't survive what happened. I paused, let it land. But the woman who stands here now isn't afraid to confront what we became. We were brilliant, then we became greedy, then complicit. That stops now. No applause, just stillness, then a nod, then another, one by one. We would rebuild, not with silence, but with scrutiny, not as a monument to legacy, but as proof that truth leaves bruises and still survives. A week later, I visited her grave. For years, I hadn't been able to say anything. Now I spoke freely. "I found your letter," I whispered, kneeling beside the headstone. "You warned me. And even when you were gone, you were still trying to protect me." The stone was slick with mist. I reached into my coat and pulled out the original cassette copy of her voice. I placed it beside the flowers. "Rest now, Mom. We're safe." The headlines faded. The news cycle moved on, but for me, the impact stayed. Elliot and Cassia were indicted. The charges stuck. No sealed deals. No loopholes. Rourke entered witness protection. Talia rejoined the company, not as a token hire, but as co-CTO. Nico consulted on rebuilding our infrastructure, one firewall at a time. I didn't celebrate. I just worked, quietly, clearly, without fear. That's the lesson I carry now. The truth doesn't always come with applause, but it always costs something. And when you're willing to pay that price, you become someone no one can erase. That's how I survived, and how I started again. Thank you for staying through my story. If it moved you, subscribe to this channel. Like, comment, or share if you've ever fought your way back from betrayal. And if you want more stories of resilience and justice, watch what's next. You're not alone, and neither am I.